Welcome back to Healthy Families, brought to you by Healthy Food Guide, the podcast where we explore practical tips and expert advice to help families eat well through every stage of life. I'm Jess Burvill.
And I'm Kathleen. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to dive into a topic that every parent can relate to, I'm sure, lunchboxes. But not just for kids, even adults need balance in their midday, right? We're going to talk about the reality of being a time poor as parents, let's be honest, and scrolling through the social media for lunchbox inspiration only to feel guilty when we can't even live up to those perfectly styled bento boxes. Does that sound familiar? So whether you're packing for your kinder kid, your growing tween, or even your hangry teenager, finding the right balance between healthy, tasty, and easy to pack can sometimes feel like an Olympic sport. I know I feel that way too, especially when it starts to feel like a mundane task.
Look, I can definitely relate to that. Lunch is often a really tricky meal to get right because you're trying to find that perfect combination of, meals and snacks that are healthy, that are going to keep you feeling full, that you want to look forward to eating, so you're not rushing out to go and buy something, different because you don't want to eat what you've made the night before. And also, of course, it needs to be affordable. But we want to highlight that the key here is about balance. It's not about perfection. I mean, we do see all these beautiful photos of, bento-style lunchboxes, which look like they've taken a really long time to put together. And who has time for that in the morning? I mean, I know I don't. So today what we're going to be focusing on is, we're really ditching the guilt here. And this is about breaking it down and making it super practical and just giving you some actual real examples of things you can make that don't require a lot of effort. Doesn't matter what they necessarily look like. They don't have to be beautiful and ready for Instagram. It's about just making sure they're tasty and nourishing and easy for you to make. All right, Kath, well, let's get straight into it. When we talk about a healthy lunchbox, what exactly should we be looking for?
Yeah, just like you said, it's all about finding the right balance. And I know this is not groundbreaking advice, but you're 100% right. It's about that. It's not about that perfection. It's about providing that right, mix of nutrients to keep the whole family energized, focused and feeling good throughout the day, because especially for kids, there's a lot of research around eating breakfast and having lunch. I mean, that the stats say that children, for instance, have about a third of their daily intake is consumed at lunchtime at school. So it's important to kind of get that balance right. Whilst breakfast is important, lunch is important as well. So to break it down here, I mean, I like to have a bit of a checklist, a lunchbox checklist, and there's technically 6 things that are on this list. And, we want to include things like lean meats, a whole grain source of carbohydrates, some fruit, veggies, a healthy snacks, and of course dairy. Dairy can be lumped into protein sometimes, but I think I'm including an important source of dairy like a cheese or a yogurt, something like that is really important, especially for growing children.
Okay, look, that already sounds like quite a long list of things for people to have to remember. But we want to make sure this feels achievable. Let's start by, what is essentially the foundation ingredient of a lot of lunchboxes around the country, which is our sandwich, or perhaps it's a bread roll or a wrap. So what should we be looking for in a good sandwich?
Well, it seems like there's a new type of bread really on the supermarket shelf every week. So you've got gluten-free, you've got low carb, prebiotic, whole grain, ancient grains, you name it. Like the choice is just huge. It's not just white bread anymore. So bread can be very nutritious, and the best provide a lot of gut-loving fiber and, of course, low GI carbohydrates, to keep your blood sugar levels stable. Plus it's delicious. So it is, you're right, it is a common thing that you do see in lunchboxes, but ideally you want to aim for the whole grain varieties. And this is because it gives you that steady supply of energy. But for those who don't like, say, whole grain varieties, like my kids, for instance, they prefer the white bread. You can get breads with added fiber, although the fiber is not naturally intact within the bread itself. It's actually added, but still bumps up the fiber. So it's still going to give you that digestive wellness and going to keep you a little bit full as well. So that's important. So it's really important to look for the fiber in the bread and the whole grains. But if you're not that type that likes the multigrain or the brown type, white varieties do serve a purpose as well. And I think it's all about taste and what's enjoyable too.
All right, so that's different types of bread and what to look for. And there's also other things you can make a sandwich out of these days. We've got wraps and we've got things like thins and potentially even crisp breads. What should we be looking for? Let's start with wraps.
Yeah, so with wraps, I mean, potentially what you're looking for there again is the whole grain varieties. I mean, this generally shows up in the first one or two ingredients. So if you look at the back of the label, look for the word whole grain. That's always a good start. But for those who don't, they might have wholemeal or white varieties with grains in them. But one thing I think with wraps is watching out for the sodium count. And we'll pop the link in the show notes of how to look for the best wraps. So for example, you're looking at something below 300 milligrams per wrap of sodium. So just watching out for sodium, fibre being an important ingredient, but of course the whole grains, and just looking for that in the ingredients list.
Yeah, I mean, the wraps ultimately are a little bit more processed than a lot of the breads you're getting in the supermarket. So, I mean, my preference would be to go for a bread if possible. And, you know, wraps are a good thing to mix up with a bit of variety. And as Kath said, making sure you're choosing that whole grain version. But if you had the choice between two, I'd probably be erring towards the bread.
And thins are a great choice as well, particularly for those who are looking for less kilojoules than slices and bread. So making a good choice for a lighter meal. Again, choosing those grainy whole grain varieties is a good choice. You know, I don't mind a cracker or a crisp bread every now and then.
And for our people who are working in offices, you know, another thing you can do to mix up the sandwiches is you can toast them. If your office has got a toaster there, you know, make your sandwich at home and you can toast it in the office, and that can just give a nice bit of a crunch to the sandwich and mix things up a little bit.
Okay, we're going to take a break now, but don't go away because there's plenty more. Okay, what about fillings? We've talked about breads and wraps. So I guess the idea here is breads and wraps being the ideal vehicle or the base or the foundation to actually add the nutritious ingredients in, like such as your salads, your proteins and your vegetables. So what should we be looking for? Like there's a lot of media clash with a ham sandwich. I mean, should we be giving our kids ham sandwiches?
Well, yeah, you've touched on a really controversial topic there, haven't you? Yeah, look, my view on the ham sandwich is that it's not as bad as, you know, some of the media might make out to be. And look, let's be honest. Ham is an ingredient that is widely available. It's affordable, and a lot of kids actually like to eat it. And whilst I wouldn't be advocating for eating ham every day, because at the end of the day, it is a processed meat and it does contain some of those nitrates that we know are not great for health and have been linked to things like cancer if they're consumed in high volumes. I think that, you know, having a ham sandwich maybe once a week is probably completely okay. And what we should be trying to do is mix up those different types of protein. So, you know, try not to eat the same thing Monday to Friday. There's lots of different options we can have in sandwiches. For example, you know, have chicken, even things like leftover roast meats. If you're making a roast on a Sunday, you could keep a bit of the meat left over, some roast beef, for example, and use that in the sandwich. Some plant-based options like some falafel. You know, there's quite a few different flavor varieties you can get now. Cheese is another good protein source for a sandwich base. So, and tuna, of course, our canned fish like tuna and salmon. You're getting your nice healthy fats there too. So look, there are quite a few different types of, you know, lean proteins you can use in a sandwich, and it doesn't have to just be ham every day.
I mean, boiled eggs are another option as well.
Love an egg sandwich.
Yeah, and a lot of these things you mentioned too, Jess, I mean, I often, with leftovers, I sometimes portion them out and put them in Ziploc bags and freeze them. So there's always something. So if I take it out in the morning, it's usually kind of defrosted by the time I get to the lunch line. And, for me, I've got 3 children to make lunches for. So by the time I actually get to it, it's actually slightly defrosted or put in a roll or a wrap. And by the time they get to eat it, it's completely fine.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, so just a bit of meal prep comes into play there.
So, look, we've talked about the bread, we've talked about the main filling, which is going to be a protein source. But of course, alongside that, we want to, try and get some fresh food in there as well. And looking at putting a bit of salad into the sandwich is a great opportunity to up your veggie intake across the day. Remembering that we're aiming for at least 5 serves of veg a day. And if we can get at least 1 serve into a sandwich at lunchtime, that's one of those ticked off. And there's a huge variety of different salad ingredients you can put into sandwiches. And of course, being mindful of thinking about the ones that are not going to go soggy by the time you get it out of your bag or lunchbox at lunchtime. So things like lettuce, capsicum, cucumber, carrot, they're always great options, and they seem to stay quite fresh and crunchy in a salad. Tomatoes are a little bit debatable. You could potentially take the tomato with you and chop it up at lunchtime and add it at the point of eating rather than putting it in the morning, depending on how ripe that tomato is. What else, Kath? What other salads could we put in the sandwich?
So I think the supermarket have some great options these days. When they do come in plastic bags, but they are there to kind of dish up a convenient source of vegetable. I mean, you've got a lot of coleslaw, you've got a lot of salad mixes and things like that. They're kind of pre-prepared, washed for you. And they're the kind of things that you can kind of, if you're not really into bread or wraps, I mean, these are something you can just add a can of tuna to or some chickpeas. So I think those salads are definitely another way to add the colour. And I think when we're talking about kids here, this is, it doesn't have to be necessarily salads, but just chopped up varieties as well. Again, these come pre-prepared and pre-packed, could be convenient. And for me, it's about having it at an eye level in the fridge. And if you can get pre-prepared as much as possible, because I want to have my morning as seamless as possible and streamlined. So if I'm prepared, like I mentioned, I sometimes freeze things, I have pre-prepared, I can get it all ready, and it's like a 5 to 10 minute production line for me. It's not like a lot of thought process has gone into it. So just having things at eyesight in portable containers ready to go, and then that way, you can have things ready at your fingertips.
All right, now we've covered off some examples of, what a great nutritious sandwich could look like. But some people just don't want to eat a sandwich or a wrap or thins. What else can we have here?
Yep, I know a lot of kids who won't even have a bar of a sandwich or a roll. So sushi I see is quite common. I mean, things like frittatas, if you're kind of doing any eggs in the morning, that's just something that you could make an omelette or something you can prepare the night before. Again, these are freezable options that you can even buy varieties where it's actually done for you in the freezer. So again, you can thaw that the night before, heat them up. This is where I think it's important to say that accessories and what you're putting the food in, like investing in a good thermos, for instance. So if you're kind of on the savoury side, but you're not quite a sandwich person, you've got heated up varieties, but you need something to put it into to keep that dish warm. So I've invested in a few good thermoses, which are really great for those non-sandwich days.
A couple of other ideas would be, you could look at portioning off some of your leftover dinner from the night before, like reheating some dinner for lunch. That could be a good option if you don't like sandwiches, or perhaps making something in advance like corn fritters or a zucchini slice. They work really well in lunch boxes. If you want to buy something in the supermarket, you can buy those tuna and rice mixes, which can be great. We often feature those in our Healthy Food Guide Awards. And if you mix that in with a bit of salad, you've got yourself a nice balanced meal there. So there are quite a few different options you can think about if sandwiches are just something that you don't want to, you don't want to feature as part of your lunchbox.
But the main thing is just having these things accessible and appealing. So I think this is where, like I mentioned before, it's what you deliver your lunches in. So for me, a popular thing is thermos on those, particularly on those non-sandwich days, and bento style boxes. These are so popular with children. Like this really is a vehicle for you to be able to add that variety in your day. Remember, for kids, they have little tummies, so they are more suited to more snack style size. And bento boxes are an ideal way to serve up those snack style choices. So you've got, a compartment for fruit, a compartment for vegetables, a compartment for your sandwich, your little finger foods, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, it's really looking at variety and what's accessible and going to be appealing. And of course, for teenagers, a bento style box may work as well, but you've got to think volume for them. So this lends us now into snacks, Jess. So in teenagers, you're looking at more snacks for them because they obviously are more active. And for adults too, we do need to think about some strategic snacking ideas. So what are your thoughts there on some snacks that we see in the supermarkets and have featured in our Lunchbox Awards?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you probably want to be aiming for a combination of some fresh whole food snacks, and then also some of those convenient prepackaged options can also be a bit of a lifesaver because, let's be honest, sometimes we need a bit of variety and the time just isn't there to make everything from scratch. So thinking about some fresh options, first of all, I mean, my go-to is always going to be fruit. We want to get at least one piece of fruit into the lunchbox each day, remembering that our recommended number of serves is 2 pieces per day. So fruits, they can either be a whole fruit like an apple, or we can be, chopping things up to get a little bit of fruit salad, pop a banana in the bag as well. I mean, there's heaps of different fruits that are, depending on what you like or what your kids like that are going to work. And then we've got things like dips and veggies. So our good old hummus dip is a good option for lunch boxes. Get you some extra legumes and fibre and healthy fats. Pair that with some chopped up veggies. It's another way to get an extra serve of veggies into the lunchbox. Muesli bars are a core, a go-to snack for lunch boxes. And I guess when it comes to muesli bars, when you go to the supermarket now, there are so many different products to choose from, and it's a bit of a minefield. But really just, trying to go for those simple options, the ones that are made from whole grains, particularly the oat-based muesli bars, I think are generally the best. You could also go for a nut bar, potentially not for kids if we've got a no nut policy at school, but for our adults, nut bars can often be quite a healthy option. And just really steering clear of those ones that have got, no fiber, they've got, added sugar, they've perhaps coated in chocolate or yogurt, or, they've got a lot of, processed fruit in them, because they can be very high GI, and they're the type of thing that are going to get digested super quickly and spike those blood sugar levels and not be as filling as some of the, the more wholesome versions made from, say, something like oats.
But they are convenient, and they are a pantry staple, and they are just something that you can add for the variety in the lunchbox.
Of course, you can either make them at home or you can buy. There are definitely options in the supermarket that, would get our tick of approval.
Okay, hold that thought. We will be right back.
And then, of course, I guess we've got those foods, there's a lot of things that are marketed as being children's lunchbox snacks. I mean, Kath, what do you think about some of ththese products like the packaged chips and things like that?
I mean, there's a lot of emphasis now on protein chips. Again, I mean, if you go back to our episode on protein, I mean, we are getting enough protein, but sometimes just having that added protein spread throughout the day doesn't go astray. But to add it to snacks, I mean, there are better ways to get your protein, such as yogurt, because we did mention on the list of our 6 is to add dairy, and that is a great way to get your protein. And of course, nuts, if you're more of an older child, going to high school, where nuts are okay to have in your diet if you don't have an allergy. So, I mean, opting for protein bar, I would probably opt more for a muesli bar than a protein bar. Again, looking at things like nuts or dairy. I mean, if you can make smoothies, again, that's when that thermos comes into play. Like, I mean, you could put cold varieties in there as a drink. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's just looking at kind of your different protein sources and, and going for more natural as possible.
Yeah, and things like with the chips, when you're looking at the chips on the supermarket shelf, just have a look at things like sodium and whether they've got a whole lot of added ingredients in them. Perhaps making something like popcorn at home, like air popped popcorn, or even the popcorn you can buy in those multi-pack bags is usually pretty good. It's still a whole grain. It's going to be the best option and far better than some really highly processed chip product that might be marketed as being suitable for kids, because a lot of the time they're actually not that great.
And they're quite expensive as well. So often what I would do is, rather than buy little individual 6 bags, I would often buy the value pack, and I would actually get my own Ziploc bag and make my own mix. So often you'll find in my kids' lunchbox is a bit of popcorn. I'll sometimes add, a couple of salted pretzels just for variety, and then I'll add some whole grain chips. So they've got a bit of a mix, and there might be some dried fruit in there. So they've actually got a bag that's got a bit of protein, bit of grain, but it's a lot of variety in there. It's just not just the one packet of, plain chips or plain popcorn. It's just giving them that variety.
Yeah, and then if we want to get our dairy serve into the lunchbox as well, I mean, again, this can be in either a snack format or it can be part of that, going back to the sandwich. But a couple of good options here would be something like a Baby Bell cheese. Now, they really travel quite well in the lunchbox. They can actually tolerate a little bit of heat, not heat, but they don't need to be sort of super cold to still be, able to eat them. And they're perfectly portioned as well. And then, of course, a yogurt. I mean, yogurt's one of my favorite, what I call tactical afternoon snacks, particularly a high protein yogurt for our, perhaps our older listeners. You can pop that in the fridge at work and get that out at about 3:00 in the afternoon. And that'll be a really, nourishing snack to tide you over until you get home for dinner.
It's important to toss in a calcium option as well, especially for kids, like we mentioned, for the growing bones. Yeah, it's important to always opt for a dairy option. I think particularly for kids, for the growing bones, calcium is super important.
Yeah, I mean, kids will often get home in time to have their afternoon snack at home, or maybe they're having it in the car or on the bus on the way home. But for adults, remembering that you're not going to be getting home, a lot of you, until 5, 6, 7 p.m. So packing that afternoon snack, don't forget about the afternoon snack. We often pack our morning snack and our lunch, but we don't remember to pack the afternoon snack. And that's where things can sometimes go a little bit awry. You arrive home super hungry and ready to eat everything in the house. So my top tip, pack an afternoon snack as well.
Now, that's a really valid point, Jess, because I think, parents put so much emphasis on the kids' lunchbox and being Instagram worthy. But I often say to parents, who I talk to about lunchboxes, look, they're only there for 6 hours. And if, they're coming home by 3, that's another opportunity to give them another nutritious snack before their dinner is served before 6 or 7. And that's another time when you've got to feed them well, because after that, around that 3:00 time, they're actually going to a sport. So refueling is important. But I get your point, Jess. For adults at work, sitting at a desk, if they don't have that snack there, and if they're going through that afternoon slump, not having something at your fingertips, often that's a poor choice made.
Much better option than going out and having another coffee at 3:00 in the afternoon, which I am sometimes guilty of, but, try to pack that snack.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one last component of the lunchbox, of course, is hydration. We need something to drink during the day. So, of course, the number one, drink of choice should always be water, both for adults and for children. Potentially for kids, you could be looking at one of those little Tetra packs of milk as well. That's a really handy way to get an extra serve of dairy in through the day. And I'd be leaning towards the plain milks rather than the flavoured milks. And sometimes you see the flavoured milks, they might still have a 4 or 5 health star rating on them. And, yes, I guess it's better if they have that than having no milk at all. But I think we really don't want to be, training that sweet palate from a young age by giving kids the sweet flavoured milks, and to try to err towards the more natural, unflavoured milk wherever possible.
The sweet flavoured milk, I'm okay with those sometimes, particularly if your kid is highly active, but they're more recommended around post-recovery because that combination of a bit of, carbohydrate with the flavouring and the protein in the milk is a perfect for recovering your muscles and your, refilling your body. So there's been a lot of evidence around chocolate flavoured milk, but, tending more towards the afternoon, maybe perhaps after sport or whatever it may be. Again, it depending on how active your child is.
Yeah, I'd actually agree with that. I mean, even personally for myself, sometimes after I've done a long workout, I would recover with maybe a flavoured milk or make my own smoothie, which might have flavouring in it. So I agree that is a good option there. But I think if we're just talking about popping a drink in to have at morning tea, I don't think you'd be wanting to put a choc milk or a strawberry milk in there.
And what about juices? What are your thoughts around like those Tetra Pak juices?
Oh, that's a controversial one as well. Look, I think the preference is to go for number 1, water. Number 2 would be milk. Juice would be probably maybe only an occasional treat. The problem with a lot of the juices is, again, they're very high in sugar and they're very low in fibre. We prefer your children, always to be eating their fruit whole rather than drinking it from a juice that might only be 25% fruit juice at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the juice again. Like I'm a kind of person that likes to go for a bit of balance. And of course, I like the kids to enjoy their meals and there's a bit of variety. And I think in the hot summer, I often will put 100% juice in the lunchbox. I'll actually freeze it. It actually serves as an ice brick as well. So I think for me, that is giving them, in my head, a serve of fruit, even though they do have a whole piece of fruit as well. But it serves as, an ice pack. It's just something to quench their thirst a little bit differently. I have to make sure it is 100% juice. It's not a fruit juice or ones with added sugar. It's 100%. So you're right, Jess, it is an occasional thing for me. But again, it's about that variety and making it enjoyable as well. And it does serve a purpose for, keeping the lunchbox, quite cold and
on those really hot days, I remember back when I was a kid, well, we didn't have air conditioning back then at school, but long time ago. And yeah, you're right. The frozen drink in the lunchbox was the only way that the food would stay cool.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think water is your best thirst quencher. I think milk is good. And, occasionally, like the ham sandwich, it's not going to hurt to put sometimes 100% juice. I mean, there was a lot of media around juice is just as good. Personally, I don't think it's as good as whole fruit, but it does count towards your 1 serve a day. It is in the guidelines. So you're talking like half a cup, around 100 mils, considers towards your 1 serve of fruit a day. So occasionally it's not a problem.
Yeah, I think the emphasis is on occasionally. You don't want to be doing it every day.
Yeah, for sure, because it is a concentrated source of sugar. And finally, just to wrap it up, whilst we talk about the foods, I did talk about the 6 things and Jess doesn't agree with me. She thinks it's a mundane list. But again, we tried to put that into more practical.
I don't think I said mundane. I thought it sounded a little bit overwhelming potentially for our listeners.
But this is why I think the bento is good, because it kind of helps you kind of gear towards, okay, I've got my protein, I've got a bit of carbs, got a bit of fruit, got a bit of variety. So, I mean, there's a method to my madness. So thinking of like variety, enjoyable, accessibility is really important. But one thing we haven't touched on is getting the kids involved. I mean, I am talking about kids here in particular, maybe not, but it also lends itself to teenagers and tweens as well, like getting as much of your children involved in the process and getting them to be decision makers doesn't go astray as well, because it actually means they will eat it if they know that they've actually made an executive decision to, put in there what, they'll know they will have.
Yeah, and that's a skill that you can carry right through into adulthood. And making your lunch to take into work each day is a really great way to save money and put yourself in the control of what you're actually eating each day.
So I think the biggest takeaway here is keep it simple, focus on balance, don't stress about perfection, because lunchboxes are just one piece of the puzzle, right, when it comes to healthy eating. So, of course, consistency over time matters more than any single meal.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. So I think, look, that's all we've got time for today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Healthy Families brought to you by Healthy Food Guide. If you've liked this episode, please do share it with your friends and family. Give us a rating or a review, and we look forward to chatting to you next time.
And don't forget to head to our website to check out our Healthy Lunchbox Awards, where you'll see our top-rated foods that we like to put in the lunchbox. They are judged according to a criteria, and of course we'll pop in the show notes of how to choose better foods such as breads or your wraps, etc. Goodbye for now.